Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Google Apps for Education Extra Credit webinar. My name is Jason Cook. I'm a member of the Google Apps team. I'm based here in Seattle, and I'm joined on the line today by two of my Google colleagues, Stephen Bucci and Ariel Hathaway, who are both based in Mountain View. Our featured speaker today is Gail Ring, Director of the ePortfolio program at Clemson University. We are very glad to have Gail with us this morning, as the Apps team has been quite impressed with how Clemson has leveraged Google Apps in their ePortfolio program. So without much further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Gail so she can share that story with you, and we'll follow that with some Q&A. Just one quick note, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat window as the presentation goes on, and we will queue those up for the Q&A portion immediately after Gail's presentation. Thanks so much, and Gail, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you to everyone for your time to come and hear about Clemson's story. I'm really excited to share what we're doing at Clemson with you. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. What you see in front of you on my slide are some examples of some student portfolios. And as you can see, they're all different. They all kind of demonstrate the uniqueness of some of our students, and you get a glimpse of things that they're interested in. You get a glimpse of, both kind of a professional element and a, kind of a personal and a creative flair. So this is what I'm planning on sharing with you today. First, I will give you a little bit of information on the history of the program and its background and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And talk to you a little bit about the changes that we've made, Google being one of the bigger changes that we've implemented over the years. We'll talk a little bit about how we've collected data to improve this program, and why we decided to make the shift to Google, and how Google has really helped us in achieving our goals, and what we hope to do next. And of course, I feel like I can't really talk about a Clemson portfolio without showing you one. So at some point in today's presentation, I'm going to walk you through one of our students' portfolios. So first, to give you a little bit of the history and the purpose of the program, it began as a mechanism for assessment. But even before that, 6 years ago, we, like many universities, were kind of grappling with, what is it we want our students to know and to be able to do. So we redesigned our general education program, and I wasn't at Clemson 6 years ago. I've been at Clemson now for 3.5 years, but 6 years ago, our faculty came together and they came up with core competencies. They came up with 22 core competencies, things like critical thinking, problem solving and reasoning, ethical judgment, math, science and technological literacy, art and humanities, cross-cultural awareness, social sciences, and written and oral communication. So we had these kind of 7 main categories of competencies that we wanted our students to be proficient in, and within each of these 7 categories, we had subcategories. So we had this new, fairly large and fairly robust general education program, and simultaneously we implemented a laptop requirement. And those two things, coupled with increased accountability that we're facing, and those of you that are at schools or universities can really relate to this, our accrediting agency, SAC, said, it's no longer just good enough for you to show us what your students know through courses and grades and transcripts and professor syllabi. We want to see actual work. We want to see student learning outcomes. So all of these things together kind of created this sort of perfect storm of, wow, the time is right for an electronic portfolio. So this gives us an opportunity, or gives our students rather, an opportunity to show what they know. It's up to them. They identify what their best work is for each of these core areas. They put it in their portfolios, and they tell us why it's there. So really, why we're doing this is for accreditation. We need to follow our students for 4 years. We need to provide SACS, our accrediting agency, these learning outcomes. But my bias is, and the reason I came to Clemson is because it was a multiple purpose. We're also doing this for student learning. Student learning is a very, very key component to the student's portfolio. This ownership, this opportunity that students decide what they want to show and how they want to show it. And for students to decide how they want to represent themselves. And I want you to remember that through the rest of my talk, because that student ownership, that's a key element that we get from Google. So, kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But, the reason that we're doing this, again, is for assessment. It's a way for us to see how we're doing in the education of our undergraduates. And we also believe that it adds value to a Clemson degree. So in 2006, we implemented a university-wide undergraduate requirement where every single student at Clemson, before they graduate, they have to have an electronic portfolio that demonstrates their understanding of these core competencies. So our program is unique for a couple of ways. One way is I think we're the only university that I know of that is using Google to such a large scale. We've really kind of embraced Google as the app to showcase our portfolios. I think we're also one of very few, and more universities are doing this, but there are a handful of us that are requiring a portfolio for every single undergraduate. I've been working in the portfolio field for many years, and I started out in a school of education, and architecture colleges are using portfolios. In some cases, nursing colleges are using portfolios. So there's pockets of a portfolio culture around a university, but Clemson is one of a handful. And when we started this 4 years ago, we were definitely one of very few universities that were doing this university-wide. Where we're actually following students for 4 years. They start their portfolio their freshman year, and they contribute to it throughout their time at Clemson. The other thing that makes us unique is this idea that our students leave Clemson with more than a transcript and a GPA. They actually leave Clemson with actual evidence, and that's another really important part, and it's another thing that Google gives us. When a student leaves Clemson, their portfolio doesn't go away. They have this portfolio that hopefully they can showcase to an employer or a graduate school, or even more importantly, they will use it to reflect, and they'll use it to kind of, continue on that path of lifelong learning. So where we began 4 years ago, we were using our course management system for our portfolio. And again, we started this the year before I came to Clemson, so my first year we continued to use this course management system, and to be perfectly frank with you, I didn't like it. I felt it was limiting, but I also felt that that wasn't solely my decision to make. I really wanted to, kind of get feedback from students, get feedback from faculty, and make a, kind of data-driven decision. So we surveyed faculty and we surveyed students, and what we found that using this current course management system is that we had limited buy-in from faculty and students. They weren't engaged in the process. Students didn't feel like they owned the portfolio. When you asked a student to show you their portfolio, they could rarely find it. It was very, very cumbersome, and it was really difficult to use. So when we used that course management system, we had problems with buy-in. We also had problems with integration. One of the things that we saw is when our architecture students created a portfolio, they created a portfolio in a different place from the course management system, and then they would have to log into the course management system to create the general education part. And that was a big conflict. You know, we needed something that integrated our general education program with a student's major program. So that limited integration was really, really problematic in our first little issue, the first bullet, which was that limited buy-in from faculty and students. So limited integration was part of the reason for using that. Well, limited integration was one of the problems that stemmed from using the course management system. The other problem was limited accessibility. We were selling this ePortfolio to students. We were promoting this as, again, this lifelong learning, this something that's going to set you apart after you graduate. And using the course management system, when a student graduated, that portfolio would go away. You know, so it didn't travel with them. It was really not promoting our mission of lifelong learning. So that's where we started. Based on, as I said, we collected data. We have ePortfolio mentors that we have a portfolio office, and we have 7 ePortfolio mentors that work Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And, you know, they work with students. Students pop in to get help on their portfolio. And when we were using the course management system, we had a lot of students coming in for a lot of help because it was very cumbersome and very difficult to use. So we got feedback from students from the portfolio mentors. We got feedback from, again, these surveys that we sent out. We actually looked at portfolios, we looked at the work in the portfolios, and it really wasn't that great. And we were seeing kind of through the work of students and the actual interface of the portfolios that there was limited ownership. We felt like students weren't owning their own portfolio. They also felt very compelled, as you can imagine, to tell me all of the problems with it. So I was getting a lot of emails from students where they were expressing their frustrations of using this course management system for their portfolio. We also do a faculty assessment of portfolios every year, and our faculty, they couldn't find the work. It was hard to get to anything, so we collected a lot of data, and that data suggested that the course management system wasn't the way to go. But it was kind of a daunting idea to move. You know, I mean, we had something, it was working, it wasn't working well, but we just really didn't know where to go. You know, what's the best ePortfolio solution? I had done a lot of research on the various systems out there, and there was nothing that really met my needs, and my needs were pretty simple. I needed something that would help me collect data on student work, and I needed something, most importantly, that students were going to want to engage with. They were going to, again, feel this ownership and feel compelled to work and build their portfolio. So there really wasn't a single tool out there that provided me that. So then kind of a serendipitously awful or maybe an awful serendipitous thing happened. I was getting ready to implement my faculty assessment in the summer of 2008, and each summer I bring in, that first summer of 2008 I brought in 8 faculty, but since then I bring in over 20 faculty to look at student portfolios and look at the work in these student portfolios. And our course management system, because we had to do a lot of work at the back end, we had to hire programmers to build this course management system and to add the portfolio component. We had kind of built a portfolio element on top of that through our programming. We upgraded our course management system in the summer of 2008, actually the week before I brought faculty in for the summer assessment. And when we upgraded our course management system, guess what? We lost everything. We lost student portfolios, we lost data, we lost artifacts, and we didn't lose it that it was gone forever. It was somewhere. I just couldn't get to it. So that was a really frightening, frustrating moment. But it was also a really serendipitous moment because now we were kind of pushed to the edge to say, do you want to continue on that path of, using a system that most people aren't really happy with, or do you want to kind of come up with a new system? So based on all of that, based on the survey data, simultaneously, this is another the really good news and perfect timing kind of event, is we began a university-wide deployment of Google. So as I'm looking for options and what to do with the ePortfolio, I'm also, and I had students in some of my other classes using, I think it was Google Pages. I think that was the original Google before Google Sites. So we were using Google Pages and, had been using that for a number of years and really, really liked it. We, as I said, in 2008, did this university-wide deployment of Google Apps, which included Google Sites. And, at that point I thought, let's just shift to using Google Sites as our ePortfolio vehicle. So that's exactly what we did. We felt like it was low cost. I mean, we are like most universities, most colleges, we're facing tremendous budget constraints. So this idea of using something that we already had, which is why we liked our course management system, but that was another really, really good argument for using Google. So we felt like, okay, it's low cost, it's flexible, meaning that you saw the portfolios on the first page. A student can design it any way they want to. They can really kind of exhibit their own creativity in their portfolio. It's also, this is really, really important, it's very, very, very easy to use. I always say about Google is the learning curve is virtually flat. And this is important for us because we're a university of about 14,000 undergraduates. And when we started the ePortfolio program, we didn't have a specific class that all students took to learn how to create their portfolio. They were doing it by coming to the studio, which, as I said before, we only had 7 people. So, supporting 14,000 with only 7 people, we needed something that was very easy. So part of the issue here was there was no single place where students learned about their portfolio. When we were using the original portfolio tool, I sat in on some of the workshops that our IT program was conducting for this. And I would see students just, holding their heads in dismay, thinking, I'm never going to get this. I mean, they were talking to them about programming. They were talking to them about, really kind of difficult things that were way over the heads of, our freshman education majors or nursing majors. I mean, these things probably wouldn't be difficult for a computer science major, but for all 14,000 students, we needed something that was universally easy to use. The other huge and really important element of this is its ongoing accessibility. When a student leaves Clemson, they still have this G.Clemson account. So all of our students have a G.Clemson account that follows them even after they leave. They have their Google email, and they have their Google Sites, and they also have their Google Docs. So these are the reasons why we decided to go to Google. We had that kind of serendipitous, horrible moment of a failure in the system that really prompted us to say, okay, how can we do this better? And how can we do this better that we can roll out? Remember, this was the end of June. This was in the summer. We need to have something stable and in place by the beginning of the fall semester, which is August. So those are the reasons why we felt like Google was the perfect solution for this. part of what we had hoped for and what I believed would happen was also evidenced by what we heard from students. Again, it was so incredibly important for our students to claim ownership of their portfolio. That wasn't something that we saw in kind of the first iteration of portfolios, but what you see in front of you is Catherine's portfolio, and you also see a comment from Catherine and another comment from Jenna, but Catherine talked about, I was just going to do the bare minimum. I was just going to tag my work to the competencies. I was going to get that in my portfolio, but guess what? I really got into it. I really, really liked kind of thinking about that interface. And, this was part of an email that she sent me, and she said, hopefully you'll like it too, and you'll think it's good enough for the ePortfolio gallery. The other thing that we really hope that students get from their portfolio is this idea of reflection. And honestly, that's not something that I can understate that Google gets us. When I started with portfolios, this was many, many years ago, more than I care to mention. As I said, I was working in a school of education. I felt at that point my degrees are in instructional technology, and I felt like it was essential for students to understand file management and for them to understand basic HTML and for them to actually, use the tools. And we were using Dreamweaver at the time, and you don't have to know a lot of Dreamweaver, but I felt like that was an important 21st century skill for students, and this was, I think, in 1999, right around 2000. I argued with many, no, all of our students need to know Dreamweaver. They need to understand where their pictures are and these ideas of file management. I have completely changed my ideas, because what happens when we use a system like Google is we don't have to worry about where the pictures are, because the pictures are all there. I can't tell you how many conversations I had years ago, and those conversations that were about the portfolio first began with, Dr. Ring, why isn't my picture showing up? And now the conversations, they start at a much higher level. They have to do with content. They have to do with reflection. They have to do with understanding what it is the students want to brag about and show what they know. So that's a really, really, really powerful and an important shift. So I can't underestimate enough, and I have to say that I've taken a 180 here in terms of portfolio for learning and ease of use being an essential element of it. So why are we doing portfolios? Just like we had these wonderful aha moments and aha conversations with students, we had these same conversations with faculty. And we didn't see this when we used our original tool. We saw this more when we used Google. The other thing I like about Google that I didn't add as a bullet, but I probably should have, is this idea of transparency. It's so easy to see what it is. It's so easy for the students to share their portfolios with us and for them to, kind of promote and brag about what they can do. And it's super easy for our faculty to get to. And our faculty aren't always, cutting edge technologically. And we really don't want to add another barrier of access between seeing a portfolio and our faculty member. So kind of common comments that we have is this one right here toward the bottom of the screen. This faculty member said, I want to make the portfolio part of an active part of this class. I want students to get up and showcase their portfolios and talk about their portfolios. And, this is kind of what they've been doing in architecture for years, right? They have crits where they critique and they think about and they talk about work. And, again, what Google has given us is it gets us to the good stuff quicker, right? You know, we're not talking about the technology so much. I mean, it's important, and I think when employers or graduate schools or any kind of viewer looks at a student's portfolio, they understand that they're good at communicating in this modality and that they understand presentation and ed tech, but they also see content. You know, it's not all about flashy pictures and animations and things like that. There's a lot of content here. So again, we get to the good stuff quicker. So I think now is probably a really, really good time for us to get to the good stuff. And I'm going to just take you to Jennifer's portfolio. Hopefully you can see this okay. And this is just one example of a Google site portfolio. Jennifer did not use one of the templates, and you know, Google gives us a lot of different templates that a student can use or do what Jennifer did, and you know, we're the Clemson Tigers. We're all about our football team. We're all about our Clemson Tigers. So she's actually shown her team spirit here. Jennifer's a civil engineering student, and so she's got professional things. She's got classes from her general engineering here. She's got a link to organizations, which is down here at the bottom of the page. She's popped in a lot of movies on YouTube. She's got links to the engineering department. She's got links to Clemson's core competencies, where she's actually tagged her work, and general engineering class and different graphics that she's done. This is one of her movies on one of the projects that she did in her program. So, you know, you'll see a lot of kind of variety in what you see from our students' portfolio. The last slide I'm going to show you will give you a link to our website, and feel free to go to the gallery and kind of take a look around and kind of explore our students' portfolios. It's perfectly fine. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation, and okay, so and I think what you saw from Jennifer, and one of the things that we hear from our students is that, wow, you know, now I see what I know. You know, it really kind of helps make learning visible to the students, and it makes learning visible, it makes the students' learning visible to an external audience. So what are we going to do next? You know, we really need to continue to improve integration. We're, as I've said a number of times, we are working on this on a very large scale. We've got 5 colleges at our university, and we've got over 14,000 students, and we really want to see this better integrated both in all of our program areas, but we also want to do a better job of integrating Google Apps, and we're recognizing that. We're seeing more and more integration of the other Google Apps in a student's portfolio. For example, the first time when we first started using Google Sites, I would ask students, have you used Google Docs or Google Presentation? And, you know, for the most part, they hadn't really even ever heard of that. Now we're seeing, you know, a larger shift for students to use Google Docs and Google Spreadsheet and Google Presentation because it interfaces so nicely with their Google Sites page. We also need to collect more data. I mean, we've been collecting data all along the way, but we need to find out what the long-term use is. We've had our first graduating class in actually last year. A year ago, December, we had 460 students graduate with a portfolio and with all of the artifacts tagged, and So we want to see, now, are those students still using their portfolio? Are they still accessing it? Again, I think this idea of, Google not going away, continuing to be available and present for students, it will encourage long-term use. We don't have that data. It's still really early in the lifespan of our portfolio program to kind of know that, but we'd like to collect that data. We really know, anecdotally, we don't have the hard numbers, but we know that that single shift from using a course management system that was difficult to use, difficult to access, and kind of offered limited opportunity to be really creative, that definitely had something to do with student engagement. By going to Google and saying, you know what, design your portfolio however you want. You tell your story. You think about your purpose. Why are you using this? What are you doing? And we see a lot of shift. A student's freshman portfolio is going to look very different from their portfolio when they're a senior. So, how does that engagement change them? How does it make them smarter? Last question is, do portfolios make students smarter? I think they do. We have anecdotal information to certainly suggest that they do. So, we need to collect more data on this whole program to see, how it has benefited our students. So, again, this single decision that we made to kind of open it up, and I feel like that's what Google has done. It's kind of opened up the portfolio so that, a student can create it any way they want. They can share it with anybody they want. It's furthered our program. It's increased our integration. It's increased the buy-in of faculty and students, and I think it was a good decision. So I'm really proud of what we've done in the portfolio program. I would like to maybe open this up for some questions. I think probably, hopefully, I've kind of stimulated you to think of a lot of questions. I'm also, you have the URL in front of you where you can go to our website and see some examples of some portfolios.
Great. Well, I've seen a bunch of good questions come in, Gail, while you've been speaking in the chat window. So let me, a couple of them, just a few short ones to get out of the way first that just might help provide more context. First of all, do faculty at Clemson have Google Apps accounts?
Oh, yes. Everybody does. Yes. And not only that, we have a really strong transfer student network, and we have a bridge program where we have some students that are enrolled at our community college in preparation to getting their grades up and getting, kind of ready to come to Clemson. They also have access to Google, and they can start building their portfolio as transfer students, which I think is really, really huge. Those students that are transfer students that aren't part of our bridge network, because Google is so universal, they have it too, and they can, come in with their own Google account.
Great. Another question that came in is interesting. Like, how do you maintain the privacy of faculty comments, for example, on academic work, when a student wants to put that work on their portfolio?
I think this is kind of a twofold question, and let me, hopefully I'm interpreting this question correctly. When a student tags an artifact, a piece of evidence to one of our competencies, they decide what it is they want to use. They can use work that's been graded by a faculty member with faculty comments, or they can use work that's completely clean without any faculty comments. So it's completely up to the student. We don't tell them what to tag for the competencies. We just tell them, you tag what you feel best demonstrates your understanding of critical thinking or ethical judgment. Maybe the other way to interpret that question is when we give students comments on their portfolio, what happens to those comments? The only comments that we give are private. They're not released through Google, so there are no ePortfolio comments that go out to the world. Those are just between the faculty member and the student.
Gotcha. So I'm going to try to coalesce a bunch of questions that came in separately. It really has to do with the subject of training. For instance, what kind of did you need to create kind of secondary training materials to show folks how to use the Google products, and then also sort of as a student is building their portfolio, you know, do you or the faculty have access to the portfolio at that stage, and how is their kind of troubleshooting and feedback given during the creation process?
Okay, that's a great question. And as I said before, what I love about Google, and you know, let me just say, I loved Dreamweaver. I felt like everybody had to learn how to use Dreamweaver. But what I loved about Google is we get to the good stuff quicker. Our students are, as Prensky has suggested, they're digital natives. I don't know to the extent that we've reached what Prensky has thought we would, but you know, our students are proficient. They can use Google. I mean, we've got 14,000, so the majority of them can click on, you know, go into Google Sites, and you know, they have no fear. They're able to figure it out. As I mentioned before, there wasn't a common place that all of our students learned about the ePortfolio. So we had tutorials online. They could come into the studio and work with a portfolio mentor. But what we've done is starting actually this year, we have a common freshman experience, which is called Library 100. All of our students take this course. I've made 3 videos. Video 1 sets up the portfolio. It kind of discusses the portfolio, sort of like I've discussed it with you. And Module 2 walks them through, this is how you make your Google Sites page. This is, you know, and each of these modules are, you know, roughly 10 to 13 minutes long. They're not very long at all, and they're on our website if you'd like to check it out. So it just kind of walks them through, this is how you make a portfolio, and this is how you create a Google site, and this is how you add pages to your Google site. The 3rd module takes it to the next level. Here's how you make, here's how you tweak it, here's how you make it pretty, here's how you add a video, and here's how you, you know, connect work to these competencies. You know, so we've really tried to give students a lot of kind of solutions. And as I said, this class is now something that all of our freshmen take. So by the end of this semester, by the end of their 1st semester, they have started out with a Google Sites page, and they know how to use it. And you know, those that don't, they fail the class. So so far this semester, not everybody has passed the class, but we have a week left, so hopefully they all will.
Regarding these training videos, is this something that we would be able to send around to the audience in a follow-up email afterwards if they wanted to access them?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah, but it's me on the video, so, you know, it wasn't my best day. So, you know, it's a video of me and also screenshots. But absolutely, I'd be happy to share those with you.
And then another question has to do with, like, exactly how are these assessed? Is it within each department, the faculty in the department, or how does that happen? In terms of since the ePortfolio is kind of a mandatory requirement,
right,
how is it that they're essentially being?
Yeah, we have multiple assessment elements that are going on. Because it's a portfolio, we believe we have to engage in formative review, and so this formative review, we have what we call creative inquiry groups, and this is undergraduate research. And we have 8 undergraduate research groups that work with a faculty facilitator. My group reviews artifacts for critical thinking, problem solving, and reasoning, and we give students feedback on those artifacts and how they relate to the competency. We also have informal review. There are, and this isn't, I mean, we obviously cannot legislate what goes on in a class and what professors require of their students in relationship to the portfolio. And not only that, you know, we, as I've said, we feel like it's important for a student to identify the work on their own and how it demonstrates the competency. But we have a number of classes, particularly at the we see a lot of this going on at the freshman level where their professors will say, you know, I want you to put this artifact in your portfolio, and they actually look at it and they give students feedback on their portfolio.
Can the faculty members, are they given edit access to the portfolio so they can put comments directly on?
No. No, they don't put well, they can. I mean, you know, in Google Sites, they can, there's a comment button, so they can certainly add comments. And to be quite frank with you, and I answered that question too quickly, I don't know the extent to which they provide comments through that comment portion at the bottom of the student's portfolio. But that's certainly an option, and that's certainly there for students to do. But just the way I see faculty using this is kind of what was said on that one slide. They have a showcase where, you know, they feel like it's better to do these comments and kind of look at portfolios as a group in the presence of the students rather than kind of do it, you know, what I call behind the screen. So that's kind of the other way. And the third thing that happens, and we're not, it's not happening in all of our majors, but we see the best portfolios in those majors where they have a capstone class, which is an ePortfolio kind of class, where the students now come back, and we see this in our psychology and our sociology and, of course, architecture, where they, and philosophy and religion, I think, is doing a nice job of that, where they now take this portfolio that a student has been working on for, you know, 3 years, and they, you know, kind of tweak it and say, okay, now let's present this for a job. And so let's think about critical thinking as it relates to your major. Let's think about communication as it relates to you as a teacher or a nurse or an architect or something like that. So again, that's not happening across the board, but I think we'll see more and more of that because that's where we're seeing the most successful and most interesting portfolios.
Gotcha. A couple questions, and maybe these are also for Stephen. One school asked if a university can adopt Google Sites without going down the Google Apps route for email. And then there's also some questions in terms of privacy controls that are built into Google Sites in terms of can you limit access to within a specific university and so on. And then lastly, someone asking what is the cost of Google Apps?
Certainly, I can jump in. You're certainly welcome to turn on and off different services of Google Apps. So Google Apps includes email, calendar, docs, sites, video sharing. There are several different components, but each school is able to customize those. So we have some schools that want the whole gambit of products, some schools that just want to enable docs and sites, some schools that split up and give their students access to all the products and their faculty staff only access to docs and sites. It's really up to you. And Google Apps for Education is free, so the only cost that you would entail is any work that you have in terms of labor, so whatever you would spend time doing, setting up your sites, et cetera. But none of the infrastructure, there's no cost. You would never get a bill from Google.
And one
in
other
terms,
question.
yeah, well, can I just talk to the
Yep.
levels of accessibility? The way it works at Clemson, and I think it's like this at other universities that I've worked with, when a student creates their Google site, they have 3 options. And this is a wonderful conversation to have with students. I really love it. And I find it eye-opening. They can have their portfolio open to the world. They can have it open to just people in the Clemson community, those people that have a G.Clemson account, or they can have it open by invitation only. So, you know, it really makes that decision, leaves that decision up to the students, which is huge. It's huge from a legal point of view. I mean, we can't tell students that you have to keep your portfolio open to the world, but it's also a really interesting conversation. And when I ask students when they're setting up their pages, how many of you feel like it's a good idea to keep it open to the world? This shocked me the first time, but it's consistent every time I do a workshop. Less than 10% of the participants feel that it should be open to the world, and those are usually two guys. In every class, it's two guys, and they feel like, yeah, it should be open to the world. The rest of the class says, no, I don't want it to be open to the world, and they have really good reasons for that. One reason, the most common reason, and this is, again, in a workshop where they're just beginning their portfolio, it's not ready for prime time yet. I don't want anyone to see it because I'm still working on it. I think that's a really smart decision. And other people are just worried about someone coming in and taking their work, or seeing things that they really don't want the whole world to see.
Great. And there was, I guess, another couple questions that are perhaps for both Stephen and yourself. One had to do with, is Google Apps ADA compliant? And Stephen, I believe that has to do with the VPATs we published.
Exactly. On our Google accessibility site, you can go through for each product and see in terms of specific accessibility areas where we are compliant or where we're working. So I'd recommend checking out the Google accessibility site, and I can get that addressed for you. We can send that as close follow-up.
Okay, great. And one other thing really has to do, I mean, I guess a couple folks are asking, is there a pedagogical framework for the type of content and reflective practices that students are engaging in around portfolio creation?
Absolutely. This was kind of interesting when I came to Clemson. I always felt like, and this goes back to using this portfolio for assessment. I have, excuse me, I've had, many conversations about ePortfolio purpose. There are some that feel like, the portfolio can only have one purpose. It's either for assessment, or it's an ePortfolio for learning, or it's an ePortfolio that becomes a showcase that a student would use to get a job. I completely disagree with that. I feel like a portfolio has to have multiple purposes. I feel like, and we talk a lot in my field about this tension between learning and assessment, but I don't see it as a tension. I feel like if a student is engaged in this portfolio process, if they think carefully about what it is they're doing, we talk a lot with portfolios about this idea of collect, select, reflect. If a student does that, and if they take it seriously, and if they start to build their portfolio early in their academic career, and they revisit it, and they tweak it, and they think long and hard and carefully about these decisions, it becomes a beautiful assessment piece. If they don't think long and hard and carefully about these decisions, and if they just slap work in there because we're saying, oh, we need this for assessment, you need to put X, Y, Z in there, I think it becomes a really poor assessment piece. I don't think we're getting a very reliable assessment whatsoever. So I feel like a portfolio that exhibits learning and engages students, and I've said this many times today, we have to engage our students. I think that then provides us with a very accurate picture of what our students know and can do. And then I feel like if it does that, then a student's going to be so proud of it, or a person's going to be so proud of it that they're going to want to show it off, and it then becomes this lovely showcase.
Gotcha. And other questions that are coming up have to do with, I guess, both accreditation. Is there, have you looked into ways that this stuff is exported or otherwise saved for accreditation purposes? And people are also asking about, when you talk about competencies, being defined across certain programs, do you look across portfolios to see, like, to try to get a sense for, like, the general level of education competence for a given subject matter?
Oh, yes, of course. Well, first let me tell you, I'm at Clemson University. That's where I live and work. But right now I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm at the SACS conference, which SACS is, as I said before, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, where I did a presentation on the use of ePortfolio as a general education assessment tool. And you know, the response I'm getting from the SACS community is that, you know, this is a very, very powerful and important tool. And, you know, I mean, those of us that are in assessment, we talk a lot about triangulating data. And the ePortfolio becomes one leg in kind of that three-legged stool. Without that leg of actual, you know, student work and student learning outcomes, coupled with, you know, we still look at standardized test scores. You know, we do our fair share of that at Clemson, and we also, of course, look at courses and grades. So, you know, I think it is becoming an important part of our assessment portfolio, as it were. And the other question was, how are we, you know, using that data? We assess all of our programs, and we use another system to assess our programs. And for each departmental program, they look to the portfolio to give them information on the student and their program area's ability to demonstrate critical thinking or ethical judgment, or, you know, cross-cultural awareness or mathematical literacy or something like that. So we do collect the data on the scores that we're giving. We bring faculty in every summer, as I mentioned before, and they actually look at the work of the students in the portfolio. And we do a random sample, and this is after the fact, and these are after students have, you know, graduated. So we can say, okay, you know, our graduated seniors, in electrical engineering, you know, they might be struggling with what to use for cross-cultural awareness. We're seeing kind of, you know, data to suggest that maybe they need more experience there. But man, as far as mathematics and critical thinking goes, you know, we're seeing wonderful, wonderful evidence in their portfolios. So, you know, that happens every summer with a group of last summer it was 23 faculty members that actually look at student work in their portfolios.
Okay, and perhaps you've touched on this stuff, but you know, one person asked, like, how do you really differentiate a portfolio from something like Facebook if you don't have you know, common rubrics in place to aid in kind of comparability? And also, speaking of SACS, you know, can you consider ePortfolio data representative if someone like SACS only sees the work that gets selected for release or being showcased on the portfolio by students?
Okay, so talking about rubrics, we have a common rubric. Every artifact that is put in a portfolio for critical thinking is scored based using a common rubric. The competencies were developed by faculty, the rubrics were developed by faculty, and these are what's used when we score it. So you can imagine that it was not easy, and it's still really a work in progress, to come up with a rubric that works equally well for, you know, engineering work as it does for the work of our nurses or our theater majors or something like that. So, you know, we feel every summer that's part of the job of these faculty is to, you know, make changes to the competencies. We started out with 22 competencies based on the work of our faculty, and based on what we're seeing from our students in their portfolio, we have reduced the number of competencies to 8. We've enhanced, tweaked, worked long and hard on, you know, refining these rubrics so that they can be used across disciplines, judging all of that work. And now I've forgotten what that other part 2 of that question was, Jason. Can you remind me? It was about the
yeah,
text
sorry,
part.
my chat window has just been scrolling kind of beyond control. It was is about SACs, and would they consider ePortfolio data representative if they were only allowed to see, you know, the work that a student chooses to put on a portfolio, or is, you know, kind of selected for release by the student?
Well, you know, I mean, time will tell. We're going up for our SACs review in 2 years. I would really argue that SACs would be more appreciative of work that a student selects. I mean, it's really easy for me to tell a student, you know, put this paper in your portfolio. This is a great demonstration of, you know, cross-cultural awareness. Whereas if a student puts something in their portfolio and they tell us in their own words how this paper or this video or this simulation demonstrates the competency, to me, you know, that really suggests critical thinking and understanding on the part of students. And you know, I mean, we see our students struggle with that. And if they don't get it right, we send them back to the drawing board and, you know, have them keep working on it until, you know, they can demonstrate the competency. But it's up to them to decide what that demonstration is. And many students have decided to, you know, keep older work and more recent work, so they kind of have that picture of growth over time.
Gotcha. And someone else said, you know, speaking of rubrics, are these graded as such? Is it grade assigned to the portfolio, or is it simply a graduation requirement for each and every student?
Yes. It's simply a graduation requirement, but as I said, we have this formative feedback that we give back to students, and there are cases where an artifact is deemed inappropriate, and we've done something that's rather bold this year in the portfolio, and that is in our early version of our general education competencies, we had written and oral communication as a competency. Well, we've eliminated that as a standalone competency because what we saw was that students were like, oh, you know, this isn't a communication artifact, so I don't have to worry about communication. And we also saw that from the faculty scorers or graders, and they were like, well, you know, this wasn't tagged to communication, so I'm not really going to pay attention to communication. We want good communication across the board in every single artifact for every single competency. So we require students to communicate well. Okay, thank you. Sorry. We want students to communicate well in every single competency. So if they don't demonstrate college-level writing, if they don't cite their sources, and that's kind of a big one that we see a lot, if they use group work where they don't identify what they did themselves and how that demonstrates the competency, then it's deleted. If they show, for example, you know, students are always trying to kind of push it and, you know, see what they can get away with. If I see a picture of a student's cat, that's going to get deleted, and they're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So.
And do you, and when kind of these portfolios are looked at for assessment, is there any kind of a lockdown? Do you request that students don't make edit during time, or do you use any of the versioning features to make sure you're looking at the document or portfolio at a certain point in time?
No, it's their portfolio. So, you know, I mean, we do say, for example, we have our graduating class. Graduation is a week from this Thursday. So in order to get everything looked at, and this is ongoing, we look at that, we look at portfolios all the time, but, you know, some students will wait to the last minute. So in order to get everything looked at, we required that it was due November 3rd. You know, but then again, they'll get feedback, and, you know, if they need to kind of tweak or enhance something, they have, you know, up till graduation to get it fixed.
Gotcha. A couple people wondering why you don't like cats. But I did want to take it back to...
I love cats.
Folks were also asking earlier about kind of the alumni, and I think, again, this is one of those questions that Stephen might want to answer as well. You know, does the Google Apps account live after graduation? And you know, how do you see students using these portfolios after graduation and so on? And then one other thing, Stephen, you might want to address is someone said, well, in the long term, how do you, you know, are there any concerns about Google ownership of the data that's stored in these ePortfolios? So I think, Stephen, do you want to lead?
Yep, sure. And also, I want to, back to the ADA question, if you go to google.com/accessibility, click on resources, and then for the sites product, there's a VPAT that you can look at that we were discussing. In terms of data ownership, it's pretty clear in our EDU terms of service that you or the institution or the end user owns the data. That's up to you to decide, but we at Google know that we do not own the data. So that addresses that point. And then in terms of alumni accounts, schools are free to give accounts for life if they'd like. There's no account limit or maximum that we impose, and it's all free. So you can give free alumni accounts. We see some schools will offer students accounts for life. Some schools will create a separate alumni domain, and some schools decide that they don't want to manage those, so they cut off access to Google Apps at a certain point. It's really up to your institution, but you're more than welcome to have alumni on there forever.
Great. And then, Gail, do you have any information at this point as to how these things are being used after graduation?
No, and that's one of the things that I had on that second to the last slide. It's still too soon to tell. I have anecdotal stories. I know that our students are getting a job by virtue of showing their ePortfolios. But in terms of long-term data, we just now have started to, add this to these follow-up surveys. Again, we only had our first graduating class last year, so the follow-up surveys will kind of give us more information on how a student uses their ePortfolio and continues to use it. And I think that's going to increase. Sorry?
Oh, and I was going to say, someone else was asking in terms, when you look at a portfolio at graduation, have you looked into doing things like mirroring the portfolio so that you could, demonstrate, what is the difference in learning at Clemson in 2010 versus 2015 or so on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Great. Well, listen, I noticed that we are coming very close to our noon break. One final question that I think I'll end with is someone is asking about, can you switch data between or migrate data between a school account and a personal account? And Stephen, that might be one that you could best answer.
Certainly. You can't necessarily just make data become part of the EDU edition. You can share a site with, if it's allowed by the administrator, to an external Gmail address, for example. But since they're different terms of service, they are two different data stores of data. So that would be probably a consideration when you're thinking about whether you want to give life access to those accounts or not. That's something you might want to take into account.
Great. And I will try to send out a follow-up email to folks that perhaps answers some of the questions we couldn't get to and includes any relevant links. I did want to ask folks, this is the first time we've done these extra credit webinars where we really focus on kind of more topical uses of Google Apps in education. So please, if you have any feedback on how today's conference went and that we might be able to use in the next 4 days, please email me at cook@google.com. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on how we could engage with you as an audience in 2011, perhaps